Hey guys, this is Mike with Sentry Security Systems, and what we're looking at here today is our RP series line of DVR NVRs. Okay, and what I'd like to talk to you today about is the user account and password setup. You gain access to this setup by going to the Settings navigation button and then clicking on the password field at the right. By default, the local password is disabled, which means that anybody can get onto the machine, make changes, view cameras, control PTZs, all that sort of thing. So you typically would want to enable this setting. Okay. Once you've done that, you'd hit the exit button. It'll prompt you to save your changes and you'll say yes. Now that you've done that, you'll notice the lock button's enabled. So if I try and do anything or click anywhere down here, nothing happens. If I click on the video portion, I get the prompt box coming up to log in. So I'll log in with our admin account, which is by default blank password, and press OK. This then unlocks the system, so you can notice this button, the color is now changed. Alright, so we're going to go back into the password setup. The admin account by default obviously has full access to everything. We're able to create a new account. The username for this is case sensitive, so we recommend using all lowercase. That's completely up to you. So I'm going to make a user account. I am going to make the authorization level as operator, and I'll leave the password blank, and I'll just put a note in here that it is a blank password. Once that's done, I'll press add user. Okay, so I can now switch back and forth between the two different accounts. But when I delete this user account, I can go down here to delete user. Once I've done that under the user right setup, the first option we have is the camera view right. Now, if you have more than one camera, you'll see them all listed here from 1, up to 32 or however many cameras you have. So if I have the option of selecting it, so I can say, okay, this user account can view camera 1, but I don't want them to be able to play back camera 1, and I don't want them to have PTZ control for camera 1. Okay, also have the option of controlling audio. So you have view, playback, audio, and PTZ options for each camera. Under the bottom we have their access rights. So for the user account, we can go through and uncheck which we don't want them to be able to do. So a user account shouldn't be able to configure the disk management. Typically we don't want them doing things like DVR board setup, adjusting the color, digital output controls. We probably don't want them doing, as well as modifying network setups or exiting the program. We may want them to be able to add, delete cameras. That's something that will be decided upon by the dealer. But if you don't want them to, you just simply uncheck them. So it's fairly straightforward. You uncheck what you don't want them to have. Under the setup page, these options are referring to the tabs down here along the bottom. System setup, camera setup, sensor setup. Okay, so if we do want them to have certain controls, we leave it checked. If we don't want them to be able to configure anything, then we'll just go in and uncheck everything. Once we have it set up the way we want for the account, we'll save our changes. It locks it. Now what's going to happen is if I log in as a user, I press OK, it's going to prompt me that it's the first time and tell me to make sure that I remember my password. So I'll say OK there. Now if I try and go in here to settings, for example, it'll let me in here, but it won't actually let me change any of the settings. Okay, so I can't change anything, and I can't click on the bottom. So it only lets me see the first page, and it only lets me view what the current settings are. This is handy because if you're doing remote support for the customer, you want to find out, if something's enabled or not, you can at least get an overview with them over the phone. So once that's done, we'll hit close. Okay. Now the other option, I'm just going to lock the system and then unlock it again so that I can log in as our admin or dealer account. I'll press OK. If we go back into the settings, the other one that I want to mention in here is the auto lock time. So if we're logged in as an administrator and we don't lock the system by default, after 3 minutes it will lock on its own. You can disable that or you can increase it up to 15 minutes. If you disable it, you want to be careful that you always remember to lock the system, or else anybody who sits down to it next is going to have the full administrative access. So once we're done, we'll hit Save Changes. And that's the basic introduction to the user account and password setup on the Sentry RP series DVRs.